Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening a file that feels, well, it feels less like a standard music biography and more like a study in paradox.
Hmm.
We're looking at an artist who is, by almost every metric you can think of, the most celebrated woman in hip-hop history.
And yet. There's always a yet with her.
There is. And the yet is that her entire solo legacy rests essentially on a single album, an album that came out over 25 years ago.
It really is the ultimate case of scarcity creating value, isn't it? But it's also, for fans, incredibly frustrating. We're talking, of course, about Miss Lauryn Hill.
The numbers alone are just baffling when you lay them out. You've got an estimated 50 million records sold worldwide.
Which is a staggering number.
8 Grammys. And just to put that in perspective, that is the most for any female rapper. Ever.
Still, to this day.
And then you go to a streaming service right now to find her solo studio work, and what do you find? You find one diamond-certified masterpiece, and then...
silence. Well, silence and a lot of lingering questions, a lot of mystery.
Exactly. And that's the real mission for this deep dive. We aren't just here to, recount the hits. We really need to unpack the why.
The why is everything in this story.
How do you get labeled the queen of hip-hop by Time, by Billboard, by basically the entire culture, and then effectively exile yourself?
And I think maybe the more interesting question today is why her influence is arguably stronger now, in this era of TikTok and constant streaming than it was when she was actually releasing music.
That's the real puzzle.
To answer that, you really have to stop looking at this as just a story about a singer. It's a collision between a deeply, deeply authentic artist and the industrial machine of modern entertainment.
A case study.
It's a case study on the cost of genius, the price you pay for not compromising.
So let's get into the evidence. We have to start at the beginning. East Orange, New Jersey. Lauryn Noel Hill, born in 1975. The narrative so often paints her as this prodigy who just, appeared out of nowhere, fully formed. But when you look at her background, she was essentially, engineered for this.
Engineered implies it was forced, which I don't think it was. Maybe incubated is a better word. Her household was a conservatory. It really was.
Her mother, Valerie, was an English teacher.
Which I think is so crucial when you look at the lyrical density she produces later on. That command of language, it came from somewhere.
And her father, Mal, was a consultant, but he also sang in nightclubs.
Right, he sang at weddings, clubs. Music wasn't just on the radio in their house. It was being made in the house.
There's this one specific detail from the research that I just love. She talks about falling asleep to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On.
Yeah.
Not just hearing it, but playing it on repeat until she drifted off. I mean, that is some heavy thematic material for a little kid.
It's incredibly heavy. You're talking about social justice, the Vietnam War, ecology, spiritual crisis. All of that is seeping into your subconscious before you even hit middle school.
And you add to that a steady diet of Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight.
She wasn't just consuming entertainment. She was absorbing the canon of modern Black American music. It was her education.
And she wasn't hiding it. She was, singing the Star-Spangled Banner at middle school basketball games. But I want to zoom in on that Apollo Theater moment because she's 13 years old.
The amateur night at the Apollo. It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, arguably the toughest room in all of show business.
Oh, for sure.
If that crowd smells fear on you or weakness, they will boo you right off that stage. It's a blood sport.
So 13-year-old Lauryn steps out. She's going to sing Smokey Robinson's Who's Lovin' You, and she messes up.
She stumbles.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. She has trouble with the microphone or maybe the key. It's a little unclear, but the crowd, they turn on her instantly.
I hear it in the old recordings. The murmurs, the jeers starting to bubble up.
For most teenagers, that is a core trauma they never recover from. You drop the mic, you run off stage crying, and you never sing in public again.
But she didn't do that.
She did not. And this right here is the first real glimpse of the steel in her character.
Mm-hmm.
She takes a breath, she resets, she digs in, and she fights through the rest of that song. And by the end, she forces that hostile crowd to applaud her.
That's resilience.
It's the defining trait of her entire career. She demands respect, even and maybe especially when the room is hostile to her.
It's also worth pointing out that she was an achiever in every sense of the word. This was not a starving artist story where music was her only option out.
Not at all. She was a cheerleader. She was on the track team. She was taking AP classes at Columbia High School. She even founded a gospel choir there.
She was a classmate of Zach Braff, which is a fun little piece of trivia.
Right. But yeah, she had this quote where she said she was just driven to achieve, period. Didn't matter if it was academics or sports or music. She had to be the best.
But that perfectionism, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It drives you to the absolute top, but it makes it very, very hard to live in the messy middle, to just be.
And that drive, it actually pushed her into acting before music really became the main thing.
Yeah, she was taking acting lessons in Manhattan. She landed a recurring role on the soap opera, As the World Turns.
And she had a small part in a Steven Soderbergh film, King of the Hill. But the real cultural touchstone, the thing everyone remembers, is Sister Act 2.
1993. Sister Act 2, back in the habit. She plays Rita Louise Watson.
And looking back at that role now, the casting is almost, it's prophetic, really. She's playing this rebellious, super talented inner-city kid with a golden voice who is, deeply skeptical of authority.
Sound familiar?
A little bit, yeah. Roger Ebert, in his review, he specifically singled her out. He called her the girl with the big, joyful voice.
But there's a production note that's even more telling. The director, Bill Duke, he credited her with improvising an entire rap scene completely on the spot.
Wow.
Which signals that the hip-hop element wasn't just a costume she put on later for the Fugees. It was already there. It was bubbling up inside her.
She wasn't just a singer who could act.
She was a rapper who is currently acting. And that leads us directly to the formation of the group that just changed the entire 90s landscape, the Fugees.
It starts with Pras Michel, who she meets through friends, and he brings in his cousin, Wyclef Jean.
At first, they weren't the Fugees. They had this other name, the Translator Crew.
Which, let's be honest, is not a great name.
It's a bit of a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
The idea was they were going to rhyme in different languages. It's ambitious, but it doesn't really have an identity.
So the shift to Fugees was a huge deal.
It was everything. It's short for refugees, which was a derogatory slur used against Haitian Americans at the time.
And Wyclef and Pras are both Haitian American.
Correct. So by taking that name, by adopting that slur, they were reclaiming it. They were turning an insult into a badge of honor. It instantly gave the group a political identity and this powerful outsider status that really resonated with people.
And Lauryn's role in this new group is so interesting because she had to fight right from the start to be more than just the girl singer.
Oh, yeah. She talks about learning how to rap by studying Ice Cube, not the female rappers who were popular at the time.
That's a critical distinction.
It's vital. She wasn't looking at, say, Salt and Peppa or MC Lyte for her flow patterns. She was looking at the aggression, the lyrical complexity of male gangster rappers.
She literally did her homework in the bathroom stalls of hip-hop clubs.
Can you picture that? Just sitting there writing bars while the club is thumping outside? She wanted to compete with the boys on their turf, using their weapons.
So they get a deal. They put out their debut album, Blunted on Reality, in 1994, and it is, by and large, forgotten by the general public.
And for good reason. It was a flop.
A total flop.
A critical and commercial failure.
No.
And the main problem was the management at the time. They tried to shove this group into the gangster rap box because that's what was selling.
It was completely inauthentic.
And the audience could smell it a mile away. But, it served a purpose. That failure showed them what not to do. It was a necessary misstep.
And there was one bright spot on that album, a track called Some Seek Stardom.
Yes. That's where Lauryn's rapping really cut through the noise. It got her the nickname L Boogie. That track put the industry on notice that there was something special happening with her.
So they regroup, they go back to the drawing board. And in 1996, they drop The Score. And this wasn't just a hit album. This was a shift in the entire atmosphere of music.
The Score went to #1 on the Billboard 200. And it's just, it stayed in the top 10 for half a year. It was a monster.
It sold 20 million copies worldwide.
But beyond the sales, it offered a counter-narrative. You have to remember what was dominating the charts at that time. It was nihilism. It was violence.
And the Fugees came in with this incredible blend of hip-hop, reggae, and soul that just felt different. It felt positive.
Lauryn had that famous quote where she called their music a drop of purity to clean a cesspool.
A bold statement.
A very bold statement, but they backed it up. You had Ready or Not, you had Fugees, and then, of course, the behemoth, Killing Me Softly.
A cover of a Roberta Flack song. And this is where you can start to see the industry machine showing its gears. The song was so popular, so huge on the radio, that the label actually pulled it as a commercial single.
A classic 90s tactic.
They forced people to buy the entire album if they wanted that one song.
And it worked in terms of sales. But it puts this immense, almost unbearable pressure on the artist. Suddenly, Lauryn is the focal point.
Rolling Stone was praising her evocative vocals. She became the undeniable breakout star of the group.
Newsweek called her the most powerful new voice in rap. And you have to remember, she's maybe 21 years old at this point. She's winning Grammys for Best Rap Album, and she's still living in her parents' house in New Jersey.
The disconnect must have been insane. She even tried to enroll at Columbia University as a history major right in the middle of this explosion.
She was trying so hard to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was impossible. The Fugees were just too big. And behind the scenes, they were completely imploding.
The dynamic was toxic.
It was a disaster waiting to happen. You had professional jealousy, for sure. But the core issue, the real problem, was romantic.
Lauryn and Wyclef.
They were in this incredibly tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship. And to make it 1,000 times more complicated, Wyclef goes and marries his wife, Claudette, while he is still deeply involved with Lauryn.
That is just a recipe for absolute disaster.
It's the fuel that burned the whole house down. There was no coming back from that. The group splits for good in 1997.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, this professional and personal heartbreak, Lauryn meets Rohan Marley,
Bob Marley's son.
And very soon after, she gets pregnant. And this is the pivot point. This is the moment the entire story turns. The miseducation of Lauryn Hill simply does not happen without this pregnancy.
No way. Because the advice she was getting from the industry, from the experts around her at this point, was just horrific.
Have an abortion. Don't ruin your career.
They saw a baby as a career ender, a momentum killer. Here she is, just getting started as a solo artist. And the people paid to guide her career are telling her that a child would stop her dead in her tracks.
But she chose the baby.
She chose the baby. She wrote the song To Zion about that exact choice. Yeah. And she claims, and I believe her, that the pregnancy actually cured her writer's block.
Awesome.
It gave her a clarity of purpose that all the fame and the drama couldn't. It grounded her. It made everything else seem small.
So she packs her bags and heads to Jamaica, to Tough Gong Studios.
The symbolism of that is just, you can't miss it. She's recording her debut solo album in Bob Marley's studio. She was consciously stepping into a lineage of revolutionary music.
And she was so specific about the production.
Very. At the time, in the late 90s, R&B and hip-hop were getting very digital, very clean, very polished. She ran in the complete opposite direction.
She said she wanted an organic sound.
Which meant she hired a literal orchestra. I mean, harps, timpani, organs, strings. She wanted the human element.
Yeah.
She wanted the mistakes, the breath, the grain in the sound.
And she wanted to be the auteur.
That was the key. She felt that in the Fugees, Wyclef always got the credit as the genius, the producer. She had this quote, "They'll never throw the genius title to his sister."
So she had to prove it.
She had to prove that she could write, arrange, and produce every single note herself. This album was her declaration of independence, musically and personally.
So the album drops in August of 1998, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And the title itself is a statement.
It's a direct reference to Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro.
Which immediately frames the album as an intellectual project, not just another pop record.
Exactly. It tells you right away that this is about unlearning. Unlearning what society, what the school system, what the music industry taught her about love, about race, about her own value.
It's obviously about heartbreak. The Wyclef situation is all over it. But it's also about God and motherhood and this radical act of self-definition.
And the response was just instantaneous. It was an explosion.
It broke the first week sales records for a female artist at the time, over 423,000 copies.
And the single, Doo-Wop, that thing, debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
It was the first time in history that an artist had debuted at #1 on both the album chart and the singles chart with their very first solo entries.
The critics were just falling over themselves to praise it. Entertainment Weekly called it an album of astonishing power. It was the most acclaimed album of the year, by far.
And then came the 1999 Grammys.
The coronation.
10 nominations. She wins 5, including the big one, Album of the Year.
She was the first hip-hop artist ever to win that top prize.
Her acceptance speech was just 2 sentences. This is crazy. This is hip-hop.
It was a landmark moment. She was on the cover of Time, Esquire, Rolling Stone. She had done the impossible.
Yeah.
She had merged hip-hop, soul, and pop into something that commanded universal respect from every corner of the culture. She was on top of the world.
But just as she reaches this absolute summit, the foundation starts to crack, and it starts with a lawsuit. We have to talk about Newark.
This is the tragedy of the story that often gets glossed over. Newark was a collective of musicians, guys named Veda Nobles, Rasheen Pugh, and others, who worked very closely with her on the album.
They weren't just session players.
Well, that was the heart of the dispute. They filed a massive lawsuit claiming they were primary songwriters and contributors, not just hired hands, and that they weren't credited properly for their work.
And this goes right back to her desire to be seen as the sole auteur, doesn't it?
Precisely. It shines a light on the incredibly blurry lines in music creation. You know, if a bass player comes up with a killer groove during a jam session, and that groove becomes the hook of a hit song, did he write the song, or did he just play the bass?
From her perspective, she saw them as talented musicians helping her execute her vision.
But from their perspective, they saw themselves as co-creators who were being written out of the narrative and, more importantly, out of the profits.
And they settled out of court in 2001 for a reported $5 million.
Wow.
That is a huge sum of money. That is not a nuisance settlement.
No, that's a significant admission, financially speaking. And a friend of Lauren's was quoted later saying that this lawsuit turned everything a little crazy for her.
It was the turning point.
I think it was. It was the moment the art became a transaction. She felt betrayed. She felt like people were trying to, in her words, eat off her plate. It was the beginning of her deep, deep disillusionment with the entire industry ecosystem.
And that disillusionment leads directly to the exile. From roughly 2000 to 2003, she retreats.
And it was a quiet, graceful retreat. It was a drastic severing of ties. She fired her management team. She stopped watching television. She completely stopped listening to music.
She was trying to deprogram herself.
That's exactly what it was. She talked about the intense pressure of fame, about not even being able to run to the grocery store without worrying about how she looked, the pressure to be this perfect superstar.
She said she realized she was being compromised for the sake of the machine.
And so she started attending Bible study 5 days a week. And this is when she falls under the influence of a very controversial spiritual advisor named Brother Anthony.
Some people in her inner circle, her friends and family, describe that relationship as being almost cult-like.
He certainly encouraged her to sever all ties with the secular world and the industry standards that came with it. And when she finally did reemerge for that MTV Unplugged No. 2.0 special in 2002, the change was just... it was shocking to people.
People were expecting Miseducation Part 2. You know, polished hits, the big band.
Right. And what they got was Lauryn in a baseball cap, sitting on a stool with an acoustic guitar. She was clearly just learning how to play.
And she was speaking more than singing.
Long, rambling, passionate monologues about reality, about God, about the industry.
And the reviews were absolutely brutal. Rolling Stone famously called it a public breakdown.
They did. But if you listen to it now, or if you read the AllMusic review, which called it unflinching and fascinating, it plays very differently.
It does.
It sounds like a woman who is refusing point blank to be a commodity anymore. She was actively deconstructing her own celebrity, her own myth on live television. It was a radical act.
And there's a track from that session, Mystery of Iniquity, that Kanye West later interpolated for his hit song All Falls Down.
Which just proves that even in her so-called breakdown, her creative output was still potent enough, still visionary enough to fuel the next generation's biggest hits. She was still creating the future.
But she wasn't done burning bridges with the establishment. Not by a long shot. In 2003, she's invited to perform at a Christmas concert in Vatican City.
You can't make this up. She's in the heart of the Catholic Church. And she decides that this is the moment to speak.
This is a moment of just extreme bravery that was completely painted as madness at the time.
Absolutely. She gets on that stage in front of cardinals and bishops, and she uses her platform to publicly criticize the church leaders for the sexual abuse scandals and the cover-ups.
And this was years before the Boston Globe Spotlight investigation, years before the mainstream culture had really accepted the sheer scale of the abuse.
Exactly. She was so far ahead of the curve on this issue. She looked out at them and said, "What do you have to say about the lives you've broken?"
The reaction was swift. The Catholic League called her pathologically miserable. Her comments were completely cut from the television broadcast.
But she was willing to sacrifice her commercial viability, her likability, to speak a truth that nobody else in that powerful room wanted to hear.
It's a recurring theme with her, isn't it? She spots the rot in the system, whether it's the music industry or the church, long before anyone else is willing to name it.
But speaking truth to power always has consequences. And following that Vatican incident, we really enter what we could call the wilderness years.
It becomes less about the music and more about, well, legal troubles and increasingly erratic behavior.
It's a really painful period for her fans, because you'd get these fleeting moments of hope, like the Fugees reunion attempts.
They performed at Dave Chappelle's block party in 2004.
And if you watch that documentary, their performance is electric. The chemistry seems to be there. It really felt like, okay, maybe they're back.
But the chemistry behind the scenes was completely toxic.
Utterly shot. When they tried to turn that one-off performance into a full reunion tour, it all fell apart. Lauryn's behavior had shifted drastically.
This is when the reports started coming out that she was demanding to be addressed only as Mrs. Hill, or sometimes Empress, by the entire crew.
Right. And she was consistently, chronically late. Late to rehearsals, late to sound checks, late to the actual shows. Praise and Wycliffe eventually just walked away again. They said they couldn't deal with the volatility.
And then the ultimate reality check hits. The IRS. In 2012, she was charged with failing to file taxes on about $1.8 million in earnings between 2005 and 2007.
Now, usually when a celebrity gets hit with tax evasion, the defense is some kind of negligence. My accountant messed up, or I didn't understand the forms.
Lauryn's defense was entirely different. It was philosophical. It was a manifesto.
She didn't say she forgot to pay her taxes. She said she refused to.
Right. She put out this long statement claiming she went underground to protect her family from what she called hostility, false entitlement, manipulation, racial prejudice, sexism, and ageism.
She essentially argued that she had consciously removed herself from the economic system because she viewed the system itself as abusive and toxic.
I have the quote from her statement to the court right here. She said, "I am a child of former slaves who had a system imposed on them. I had an economic system imposed on me."
It's an incredibly powerful sociological argument. She's connecting her personal situation to a much larger history of the exploitation of black artists and the commodification of their talent.
Right.
But unfortunately for her, the IRS and the United States federal courts do not accept sociology as a valid legal defense for not paying your taxes.
And the result was prison.
It was. In 2013, she was sentenced and served 3 months in a minimum security federal prison, and then another 3 months under house arrest.
It is such a jarring image. The queen of hip-hop, the woman who swept the Grammys, sitting in a prison cell over a tax dispute.
But even there, even while she was incarcerated, she didn't stop creating. She released a single called Consumerism from prison.
Which just shows that her mind never stopped working. She was still analyzing the world, still critiquing this culture of consumption that she felt trapped by. She never stopped being an artist, even when she completely stopped participating in the industry. And that really brings us to the modern era. She's out of prison, she's touring again. But the biggest conversation around Lauryn Hill these days, it's not about new music. It's about her clock management.
The lateness.
Yeah.
It is legendary. It's become a running joke, a meme at this point.
And we're not talking 15 or 20 minutes late. We're talking about arriving 2, sometimes 3 hours late to your own shows.
Sets get cut short because venues have strict noise curfews. I remember reading about a show in Atlanta back in 2016 where she only got to play for 40 minutes because she arrived so incredibly late.
And fans, understandably, get furious about this. Tickets are expensive. People hire babysitters. They travel for these shows.
But Lauryn's explanation for this is, well, it's fascinating. She doesn't apologize in the way you'd expect. She doesn't say, sorry, the bus was late.
She frames it as a spiritual necessity.
Exactly. She says it's not a sign of disrespect. She says she is aligning her energy with the time.
I have to read this quote from her. She says, "I don't show up late because I don't care. I show up late because I care deeply, and I have to align my energy with the time."
So to her, a concert isn't a product or a service that she's providing to a customer who bought a ticket.
It's a ritual.
It's a ritual. She rejects the very idea that she is an employee of the ticket holder. She believes she is a vessel for something greater, and you cannot force that vessel to pour until it's ready.
In 2023, she even responded to criticism by telling a crowd that they were lucky she shows up at all.
Which now? That takes some serious nerve.
It does.
It borders on arrogance, absolutely. But it also just underscores her absolute unwavering refusal to compromise her internal state for external demands. She will not punch a clock for anyone, not even for thousands of paying fans.
And just recently, in 2024, another planned Fugees reunion tour was canceled very abruptly, and Praz actually sued her for fraud and mismanagement related to it. So the drama, it just continues.
It never really ends. The chaos has become part of the package now.
So, okay. We have the prison time, we have the legendary lateness, the complete lack of a sophomore album, the lawsuits. On paper, it sounds like a career in absolute decline.
It does.
But you argue the opposite. You argue that the Lauryn Hill effect is actually the dominant force in hip-hop right now.
I think the evidence is undeniable.
Yeah.
If you really look at the structure, the sound, the DNA of modern hip-hop, her fingerprints are everywhere.
So let's start with the sound itself.
The seamless blend of singing and rapping. She popularized that. She made it the standard.
Before her, you were generally one or the other, right? You were an MC or you were a vocalist.
Pretty much. There was some crossover, of course, but Lauryn showed that you could be truly elite at both. You could out-rap the best rappers and then turn around and out-sing the best R&B divas, sometimes on the very same track.
And that is the absolute blueprint for an artist like Drake.
Drake is basically the Lauryn Hill model, scaled for mass production. He is her direct descendant. He even samples her song X Factor heavily on his massive hit Nice for What.
He's clearly studied her.
He's studied her melodic transitions, her vulnerability, and it's not just him. Kanye West has sampled her constantly throughout his career. Cardi B used her flow and an interpolation on Be Careful, J. Cole. Her DNA is just embedded in the code of the genre now.
And you have to look at someone like Nicki Minaj.
Nicki's story is the perfect example. She was famously rejected by labels early in her career because, as the executives told her, she wasn't Lauryn Hill.
Wow.
That was the bar. Lauryn Hill became the benchmark for what a complete female rapper could be. Lyrical, versatile, musical, and a commercial powerhouse.
And this influence, it goes way beyond just the music. It's the visual language, it's the fashion.
Yes. When The Score and Miseducation came out, the dominant aesthetic for female R&B and pop stars was very specific. It was very polished, processed, often chemically straightened hair.
It was an assimilationist aesthetic, really, designed not to be too threatening to a mainstream white audience.
Absolutely. And then Lauryn shows up on the cover of Time magazine with locks. She wore bantu knots, she wore huge afros, she rocked massive hoop earrings and baggy denim.
She normalized natural black beauty in the mainstream pop space in a way that just hadn't been done before at that level of fame.
Virgil Abloh, the late great designer for Louis Vuitton, called her a forever muse. You can see her influence in old Dior collections by John Galliano. Alexander Wang cites her as an inspiration. She made it cool to be your natural self. She proved you didn't have to look like a plastic pop doll to sell millions and millions of records.
And we can't ignore the activism. We talked about the Vatican, but it goes deeper. She founded the Refugee Project way back in the 90s for at-risk youth.
She supported scholarships in Jamaica. And much more recently, after the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, she released that haunting track, Black Rage.
Yeah, that was incredible. It was set to the tune of my favorite things from The Sound of Music.
But the lyrics were all about the centuries of trauma and police brutality. It was chilling. And then she refused to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick.
She has, at every single turn, consistently chosen her morals over the money, over the bag.
That is the one through line that connects everything. From the very beginning, turning down that forced gangsta rap image, to refusing to apologize to the Vatican, to refusing to file taxes in a system she viewed as fundamentally corrupt, to turning down the Super Bowl. She is nothing if not consistent in her principles.
So we circle all the way back to the paradox we started with. She released one perfect solo album 25 years ago. We were still dissecting it. We were still listening to it. The industry calls her difficult. They call her crazy, unreliable. But is that a fair assessment? Difficult is so often the label that a patriarchal industry gives to a woman who simply says no.
And Lauryn Hill said no.
She said no to the machine. She said no to being a product. She said no to the follow-up album they demanded. She said no to the schedule, to the expectations.
So did she fail by not following up? Did she somehow waste her incredible potential?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think she succeeded by surviving. I mean, think about it. In an era where artists are basically content farms, expected to release a new project every 18 months and post on social media 5 times a day just to stay relevant.
Yeah.
Lauryn Hill proved that one perfect, authentic, undeniable piece of work can sustain a legacy for a quarter of a century. And counting.
She just opted out.
Okay.
She took the hit to her public reputation, maybe even to her bank account, but in doing so, she kept her agency.
And she kept her soul. I think that's the question her career forces us to ask. When we look at her story, we shouldn't see a tragedy of wasted talent. We should see a revolution. She challenged the very definition of what it means to be a star in the modern world. And she forces us, as listeners, to ask ourselves, what is the true cost of our own authenticity, in our own lives, in our own jobs? And are we willing to pay the price she paid?
That is the ultimate question she leaves us with.
And that's the thought to leave you with today. Pull up the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Listen to it again. But this time, don't just listen to it as a nostalgia trip. Listen to it as a historical document, as a blueprint for someone claiming their space in the world, no matter what the consequences.
Well said.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.